We're at an interesting time in history as we straddle more traditional command and control forms of leadership on one side and newer, more human-centered models of leadership on the other. My guest this week, Keith Rovinelli, shares an interesting perspective on leadership and how we can create more thriving workplaces. As a full-time firefighter and HR consultant, Keith straddles two different roles and two very different worlds, yet he intentionally strives to connect the two by translating lessons and experiences he learns in one to the other. As Keith shares his perspective on leadership, he also talks about his family's roots in service and how that has guided his career path. We also talk about his love for yoga and how he went from hiding this from his fellow firefighters to actually bringing it into the fire station where others now join him. Keith is also a dog lover, and you may hear that his dog has much to say about the topic of leadership. We're all about keeping it real on this podcast, so we welcomed Keith's dog into the conversation. Thank you so much, as always, for listening. Welcome to the Impostor Syndrome Files. My name is Kim Meninger, and as an executive coach and former high-tech leader, my personal mission is to help professionals overcome imposter syndrome so that you can advance your career with confidence. Each week, I interview a new guest who brings a powerful perspective to this conversation, including personal stories, best practices, and new insights. The more we talk about this issue, the more we destigmatize imposter syndrome, recognize that we're not alone, and empower ourselves to access the tools and resources that can help us and those around us. Thank you so much for listening and for sharing with others you think would benefit from this conversation. Hi, Keith. It is such a pleasure to see you again. I know you and I have had some previous conversations, and I'm excited to continue the conversation, especially in a way that we could share with the listening audience. So before we dive in, I'd love to invite you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kim, and likewise, pleasure to see you again. And my name is Keith Rovinelli, and I'm a full-time firefighter and leadership HR consultant. I'm a dog-loving, yoga-practicing, self-proclaimed chef. Those are my three major hobbies, I'd say. And what I do and what I try to hone in on it as my craft is just helping build thriving communities through cultivating leadership skills through individuals. So as a full-time firefighter and HR consultant, I try to blend those two careers together to ultimately just help people become better versions of themselves, to become better coworkers, to become better spouses, better husbands, wives, brothers, sisters, friends, and that's what I do.
So I want to spend a moment on that because I think it's so fascinating that you have this dual career. First of all, just from a time perspective, because we all feel so busy with our one career and you've got two. But I also love that you are thinking intentionally about how they connect. So can you tell us more about the journey? Like, how did you end up in a place where you have these two careers that on the surface may seem very different, but that you've actually thought about how there is transferability there?
Certainly. So I started my career in HR as a recruiter about, probably 12, 14 years ago. And I really loved being a recruiter. And actually, if I even take a step back further, my first job was working at McDonald's when I was in high school. And when I reflect back at that, I was a crew trainer. And so training and developing and helping, that's how I look at, learning and development and training has always been something I've been passionate about. My father was a firefighter. My mother was a social worker. Both my sisters are social workers. My brother's been in corporate wellness. And I'm a firefighter now. So, helping people has always been kind of like our family business. So when I look at my career in the corporate world, it's always been on that, training and development, a recruiter, which in my mindset was I was helping people get jobs. It wasn't about, filling recs and making money. It was helping people, to find their career. So as I went through that journey in HR, learning and development, like I said, talent acquisition, executive development. And there was just something that was missing. And I didn't really know what that was exactly. And an organization I was with at the time didn't have the same values that I had. And I was kind of stuck in a rut. And my father said, why don't you take the test to become a firefighter? You've always expressed interest in that. I was kind of hesitant because I always wanted to make a ton of money and I wanted to, climb up the corporate ladder and do all those things. But at that time in my life, that just didn't feel right anymore. I didn't want to do that. That wasn't what happiness was to me. So I took the test to become a firefighter, and that process is a pretty lengthy process. So throughout that time, I actually changed organizations, and it was working for a company that I really loved, and I loved the values, and I loved everything about the people there and what I was doing. And then I got the call to become a firefighter, and I had a really tough decision to make. It's, do I turn down this opportunity that, a lot of people say it's, the best job in the world. It's, hitting the lottery. And I truly do believe that. And I'm so thankful that I went for it and I didn't decline that job offer and stay in the corporate world, because I was able to do both and continue to do both today. So as I've gone on that journey, I've realized that the skills that I've learned being a firefighter and continue to learn, being part of a high performing team, I transfer over to the corporate world and vice versa. All the skills that I learned throughout my HR career and continue to learn on how to be a leader and how to manage people, I take over to the fire department too. So it really is an interesting intersection that I'm still today, constantly trying to evolve and say, okay, here's what we do at the firehouse. How can I do that in my corporate world, and vice versa? So it's been a wild journey. I love it. You mentioned, how do I have the time? And I work 24-hour shifts at the fire department. And then the other time I'm working on my project work as an HR consultant. And I think Simon Sinek said it perfectly, where when we stress, it's because we're focusing on work that we're not passionate about. But when we focus on the work that we're passionate about, it's not stressful at all. And that's how I truly look at things.
That's a really good point. I would say too, that as a business owner, I work harder, work more hours than ever before, but I feel the lowest amount of stress and burnout that I've ever felt. So I think when you are doing work that feels meaningful to you, it absolutely makes a difference. And I love how at the heart of everything you shared was that fundamental value of service, and that it came from your family, that it's really embedded in who you are. And I just think that makes such a difference. Obviously, as a firefighter, we make that connection automatically. We assume, that people who are willing to make those kinds of sacrifices and willing to do that for other people must have a service orientation. We don't necessarily think about that when it comes to the corporate world. How does your perspective on leadership sort of guide how you see your whole career, and in terms of like the holistic view of these two parts of your career? Like, tell us more about what you think about leadership and where we are today.
Yeah. So within leadership, right, there's so many different skills and things that you can talk about that would make a good leader. But for me, what I think it boils down to is truly caring about the people around you. And that's where I think that service mindset that I have comes into play in everything that I do when it comes to coaching leaders. So if you truly care about your people and you do all the things that come along with that, then that's going to be a good leader. And there's so many different aspects that are going to go into that too, with feedback, communication, driving business. All those things happen, and they're going to happen. But if you truly care about your people, it's going to make a lot of things easier, and it's going to help you with all those managing conflict and everything else that comes along, leading a team. So truly being a kind person, which for me, the difference between kindness and being nice is being genuine. So a genuine person, a genuine leader that cares about their people, ultimately is the foundation for what I think is a successful leader.
So we've obviously been through a lot as a world over the last few years with the pandemic and everything. Do you see a big difference today in how people think about leadership and this idea of really caring about people than pre-pandemic?
Absolutely, because as you see it with the Great Resignation, right? A lot of people are leaving because they're in toxic cultures, or they're not happy with the people that they're working with, or their leaders, or the organization. So that mental health, that ability to truly connect with people was so front and center. And a lot of the work that I focused on during the pandemic was creating solutions for mental health awareness, for checking in with your people, asking those questions, how are you doing, and truly meaning it. So it's at the forefront and there's no running away from it. And I know there's a lot of senior leaders, or I don't want to say senior leaders, actually, a lot of more tenured leaders that have been around for a while that struggle with this, because in their mind, that's not what they were brought up. That's not how they were led. So it's not their fault, because everything that we do in life is based off of how we were brought up, the values that were instilled in us, and what we were used to, right? So as anything with change, this is just another one of those things. And, there's a lot of leaders that I deal with that say like, oh, why can't they just, get their work done? Now I have to worry about their feelings. I have to worry about this. I have to worry about that. And it's like, yeah, you do. Right. And if you don't worry about that, they're going to leave, or even worse, they're going to be disengaged and they're going to stay.
That's so interesting, because I would agree that that's one of the biggest roadblocks to this kind of change. And I like that you're so sympathetic to it, because I do think that it can be really frustrating, but it's true. We have had a huge paradigm shift in a very short window of time, and a lot of people are having trouble catching up to this new way of thinking about things. And I guess, do you have thoughts on how perhaps people within organizations can try to influence change given that backdrop? Like, are there things that you have found to be helpful as talking points, or ways to kind of bring people on the journey who may be balking at the idea of take care of our people, right? Like, just do your job.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I focus on is it currently working, whatever that is, right? So if you're not worried about your people's welfare and checking in with them, is it currently working? Do you have high turnover? Are you driving sales, or whatever it is your business is? And if the answer is no to that, then it's okay, well, let's take a step back and let's try to figure out what is missing. If you have a well-oiled machine and your people are happy and everything's working well, then you probably are taking care of your people. But if you're experiencing something where you're using someone's services like mine, or you're constantly having to deal with turnover, then that's something you need to look at. And I think it's hitting those numbers straight in the face with somebody and taking a look at that to realize, okay, if it's not working, then we have to change something.
I think it's a really good point too, because I always think about feedback in the context of, if you're going to present somebody with feedback, or you're going to ask them to do something differently from the way that they've always done it, you have to have a compelling reason to ask them to do that, right? And if what they value is business results, if what they value is productivity across their team, that's what's going to get their attention, right? Maybe not this idea that, oh, we should be focusing more on the human side of work, which I wholeheartedly believe, but more so of, how's that working for you? Like you said, right?
Yeah. And a lot of times too, that I like to deal with or talk about with this is because I hear a lot, oh, I don't have time. I don't have time to check in with all of my people or have these conversations. We're so busy. We're supporting the business, or we are the business. And one thing I always like to do is I'll grab the cell phone. I'll say, pull up your cell phone. Let me see your screen time. Like, you have the time. And I truly do feel that, and yeah, we need our mindless scrolling and we need our Netflix and chill. But, are you using your time wisely to connect with your people? And I heard Marcus Buckingham speak earlier this year. And one thing he said that hit home with me is, if you don't have time to check in with your people every single week, and that's everybody that directly reports to you, you're either managing too many people or you're not an effective leader. And that really hit home to me, because, again, I know everybody's busy and there's so much going on, but if you can take those 5-10 minutes, that's really all it is, to check in with your people, to say, what are some obstacles? What can I help you with? I hear you, I feel you, I see you. That's going to free up all your time down the back end, when you deal with conflict and disengagement and feedback. If you have those built trusted relationships, it clears up all the stuff down the road that you won't have time to manage. So I truly believe that as a philosophy.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think about time too, as like, we all think we don't have enough time. You're right. If we look at our screen time, there's a lot of wasted time. Yeah. But I also think we don't have time not to, right? Because you're absolutely right. It may feel like an investment of time proactively that we don't have the luxury of having available to us. But you're going to use that time one way or another. You're either going to use it in a proactive, trust building, relationship building way, or you're going to use it in, having to clean up people's messes because you didn't set clear expectations, or backfilling people who leave because they don't feel respected. I mean, the time is going to come. It's a matter of how you choose to spend it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's tough for leaders to see that up front because they're so busy, like you said, and they're running organizations and they're running teams. So it's like a tough sell to them to say, like, if you put in the time now, it's going to work out. But I use the analogy of getting fit and losing weight. Like, if I wake up Monday morning and I say, all right, I'm going to eat a salad today and I'm going to lose 10 pounds, that's not reality, right? It takes time to drop that weight, and you have to put in that investment up front so then you can see the long-term goal down the road. And it's really challenging for managers to understand that, but it really does work. And another quote that I really love, I'm big on quotes, is from Debbie Millman. And she says, busy is a decision. And what I love about that is that, you can say I'm too busy to talk to my people, or I'm too busy to do this, but it's a decision you're making. And it could be a good decision because you're focusing on other things that you prioritize. But when you say I'm busy, it is a decision, and it's not something that should be taken lightly.
That's a really good point. And one thing I think about a lot too, in the context of what you're talking about, and I think you would have an interesting perspective on this given your work, is a lot of people were thrown into management. They didn't want to be there, right? They were promoted because they were really good at what they did. It was the only avenue to achieve greater status, higher compensation, whatever career advancement, the path looks like within their organizations. So there are a lot of reluctant managers right now who feel burdened by the fact that they have to take care of their people when really all they want to do is do the work. And so I'm curious how you see the either need for or the current state around just developing managers, because it's a new way of, I had read somewhere a couple of years ago in the midst of the pandemic that, managers are now being asked to be social workers, right? They're being asked to play roles that they never signed up for. They've never been trained for. They don't even want. So how do you think about that piece of things?
Yeah. And I don't think there is like a one solution for all of it, right? Because there's so many different aspects for new managers and what they have to deal with, especially coming out of the pandemic. But one thing that I'm really passionate about is helping individual contributors learn management skills and leadership skills before they get into that seat. So whether that's some type of program where you're giving them those skills before they're ready, either formalized or informal. So self-paced learning activities, depending on the scope of your business. If you have like a learning management system where they can go in and take courses on their own. Curating content, I think, is huge for large organizations or even small organizations, because you can Google or what is an effective leader, and you're going to get so much information that it ultimately shuts someone down from wanting to learn because there's too much. So how can you as a leader, or you as a learning and development function, or as an HR function, curate content so the individuals can take it as they see fit, and they're starting to learn these skills throughout their career path. So when that time comes where they're in that seat or they get promoted and they might not be ready, hopefully they've had a few learnings along the way, that they're not going into it completely cold. And then, of course, you're going to have to continue to build on those skills, but at least they have some type of foundational, groundwork. And an example that I can give that from actually being a firefighter for this is that we have the traditional, fire department, and I'll speak to mine, is there's an officer on every truck. So at my firehouse, we have 2 trucks. One has a captain on it and one has a lieutenant. So those are the leaders, those are the managers, right? And we're the firefighters on that truck. So when one of them is out, out sick or out on vacation, if they don't hire an overtime officer, then one of our firefighters becomes the officer for that shift. And now you're the leader, you're the manager, you're the officer on that truck. So what I've seen in my firehouse or my department is some of these officers, during a shift, they'll work with us as firefighters to be acting as a lieutenant or acting as a captain. So when the time comes they're out, we've already experienced some of that. So they'll say, hey, you jump up and ride the front of the truck. I'm going to jump in the back of the truck and you kind of lead this call with me being there so I can help you if you make a mistake. That way, when they're out and they say, hey, Rovinelli, you're going to be the acting lieutenant today, it's not the first time I've sat in that front seat, and I've done it with my leader behind me as a support. So now when I get into that front seat, it's not, oh my God, I've never done this before. I'm completely new to it. Help me. It's okay. I've got some experience, and I'm still going to, need help, on the back end, but it's not the first time I've been in this seat.
That's a really good example. And I think it all comes back to what we've been talking about that proactive nature of preparing for whatever it is, right? So to be on the lookout, if you are a manager, for how can I empower my team before they step into formally, right? Certain kinds of positions. How can I send them into, maybe I take them into a meeting with me, or I send them in my place, or, I give them a team lead or a project lead role so that they can get a flavor for it. And also decide, do I want to do this? Is this work I actually want to do more of, or is this out of alignment with where I see my strengths?
Yeah. And if you're not doing that as a leader, then you're managing and you're not leading, right? Mm-hmm. So if you don't think you can trust your team enough to step into a meeting for you, to be the project lead, then what's missing there? Is it more skills that you need to provide them so they're ready for that? Or is it you as a manager that need to just let loose and just trust your team? And they might fail, which is completely fine. And then that's a learning moment, right? For you and for the person that failed. And then you can build upon that. But not giving them the opportunity at all is not doing anyone good. It's not doing the individual good. It's not doing yourself as a manager good, and overall the organization.
Absolutely. And so I want to take it back to you for a moment, because we're having a good conversation at more of a macro level, but I really want to understand how you have felt about playing this dual role, one that you've certainly consciously made a point to integrate. But have you ever struggled with self-doubt? Have you ever struggled with imposter syndrome or any kind of challenges as it relates to your confidence?
Yeah, I have. And, I never thought about it as imposter syndrome until actually you and I met. And then I started to think about it more. I'm like, I guess I have had it. I just never labeled it that. And I kind of moved through it. But, the story that I can share with that is, like I mentioned in my intro, I'm a big yoga guy. I love to practice yoga. And when I got on the fire department, that was something that I would never dream of even telling people that I did, let alone practice yoga at the firehouse. And I'm at the firehouse for 24-hour shifts. And if I work, an overtime shift, I could be there for 48 straight hours. And, I love to practice yoga. So when I first started, again, I would never tell people I did yoga. I had this fear that maybe they would judge me, or, they'd like, what is this yoga stuff? Because I was like that too, or before I started practicing, when, people in my life, like, oh, I practice yoga. I'm like, oh, you stretch? To me, that's what I thought yoga was. So, throughout my journey, and just being more self-aware and more vulnerable, I ultimately got over that. And then I would practice yoga at the firehouse, but I would still do it behind closed doors. I'd go into the dorm room, and kind of shut the door, and so no one would see me. And then now, not only have I practiced yoga at the firehouse in front of people, posted it on my social media, I got a yoga instructor that specializes in yoga for first responders and the benefit of first responders to do a 1-hour presentation on what the benefits of yoga is for first responders. And I set that up for my entire department. So all 4 groups had to go through it. And I got some jokes, because it's a joking culture, oh, keep the yoga guy, bringing someone in to try to make us do yoga and things like that. But when I reflect on that, it was all about me thinking people were going to judge me. And that's not the case. I try to think now that, like, no one really cares about what you do. We, in our own mind, we think everyone's going to care. And it's like, that's not reality. People care about themselves, and sure, you care about people, but it was all in my head, really, because once I started practicing, or even getting, this presentation for our department, I had more people reach out to me on the side, like, hey, thanks for doing this. This is awesome. I've always kind of wanted to do it, but didn't really know where to start. And then, of course, I get the people making some jokes, and it's all in good fun. And that was like a real aha moment for me. It's like, wait, that was all in my own head, that self-doubt. And it's really, don't take things personally. No one really cares what you're going to do. And if you can impact one person positively, then it's all worth it.
I love that story so much. And I'm so glad you shared it here, because I just think that is such a great example of the very natural self-doubt that we feel when we feel different from people around us, right? So it's easy to assume I'm in this particular culture, they're not going to accept something different, especially something that might feel a little bit like woo-woo or, whatever you want to call it. And so it would have been really easy to just compartmentalize that side of yourself, not ever revealed it. And then, you would have felt safe, but you wouldn't have felt authentic.
Right.
But instead, you were able to get to a place where you not only owned it, but you actually created an experience for the people around you so that they could decide if they wanted to be part of it as well. And I'm imagining that has had an influence on the culture, right? It's not just a simple, now everybody knows this about me, but now other people who want to do that can feel safe to do it as well and can ask you questions, and it can be part of an open conversation. And I think it's just a perfect example of how, if you decide to face the fear, to take the risk, to be the leader in that situation, that it can have benefits, not just to you, but to other people too.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what really fuels me. I mean, probably about an hour before we jumped on this call, I had a fellow firefighter call me up and tell me that he started his day this morning with 10 minutes of meditation. And he was asking me about yoga resources. And so like that to me was like, that's why I am vulnerable and I want to share, whatever it is that I have. And I want to tell people to do the same, because when you can make that impact with just one person, it makes you feel so good that you want to continue to do it.
Do you have any, because yoga is a perfect example of this, but there could be, and we could substitute any number of things for yoga, right? So if there are people listening that are thinking, gosh, I've been thinking about something in my own life and bringing that more outwardly into the open, do you have any advice for people around like what that first step might be? Like, how do they think about breaking through that fear?
For me, one thing that the strategy I use is I tell people. So, I just launched, a TikTok this past weekend, and I finally posted a couple of videos on there, and I haven't done it in a while. Like I wanted to. Let me back up. I don't want to, because I don't like creating that content for TikTok. But a lot of people, like, you have something, and if you really want to help people, that's the avenue you need to do it. So I'm like, okay, in my mind, I got to do it. So why did I finally do it this weekend was because I kept telling people, hey, I downloaded TikTok, but I haven't posted anything yet. Hey, I'm going to do it soon. And now as I started to do that, people are like, have you done it yet? Have you done it yet? And now if I don't follow through with it, now I'm not being impeccable with my words. So that's the strategy that I've been taking lately, is like, tell people you're going to do something, because then if you don't do it, you're a fraud. So that would be one thing that I recommend is just to say you're going to start doing it and be impeccable with your words. So then you actually finally have to do it. But also just realize, whatever it is you want to do, don't worry about the people that might judge you. Think about the people that you're going to help. And if you can focus on that, then hopefully you'll be able to make that next step, because not everyone's going to love whatever it is you want to do, right? But there's going to be some people that do, and those are the people that you should worry about.
I love that. And I think, it may feel like an oversimplification. We are all emotional beings. We care about how other people think about us. But when somebody else judges you, it tells you so much more about them than it tells you about you. Right. And so, you mentioned the lighthearted jokes. It's a joking culture. And I'm sure there were people who were giving you a hard time just for the fun of it. And then there may be people in any environment that are a little bit more, I don't know, tougher in their criticism or in their judgment. And it's really hard for us to not take that personally or respond to it in emotional ways. But those are not people who like you said, right? Like the right people will be responsive to what you're trying to do. And usually that reflects an insecurity on their part, because maybe they don't like yoga, and that's totally fine. But that doesn't, the fact that they're actually responding in overtly offensive or, critical ways tells you a lot more about them.
Yeah, certainly. And I can share another story with that. So when I got this yoga presentation put together for our department, it wasn't clearly communicated on exactly what it was. So when people saw it on the training calendar, they thought we were going to be practicing yoga. And so there was a lot more of a negative response with that, as opposed to them thinking it was just a presentation. And so specifically, I was at a training, a different training with other guys on my department, and someone, had a comment for me, a pretty negative comment, and I reacted to it, and I called this person out. We kind of had an argument, and I walked away from it not feeling happy at all. I'm like, I can't believe I reacted the way that I did. I shouldn't take things personally. This is just his view on yoga or whatever it is. But, we had words, and after, I apologized to him and, listened to him and heard where he was coming from. And we have a great relationship now, and not that we did before, but what you said about, not taking it personally, because it's really hard because we are emotional beings. I fall victim to it, and I did within the last couple of months. So it's being able to kind of take that step back and be like, you know what, you're right. It's not a reflection of me. I can't take this personally. Whatever this person has going on, whatever their values and beliefs and experiences are, is what they believe in, and I can't take that personally. I can only just be the best version of myself. And if they want to come along for the ride, I can help them. And if they don't, that's fine. There's so many other people out there that hopefully I can reach.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that's really important about what you just said too is to that's part of the journey, is for us to acknowledge that we are going to fall into that. It is who we are. There are going to be days when we're just tired and we don't have the same strength to be able to resist some of these things, right? Or we're stressed. There's other things that are going on. And so part of it is to recognize when that happened and to ask myself, like, what's the next step that's in alignment with who I want to be, right? Yeah. And so if that means revisiting a conversation and letting people know, hey, that didn't go the way I wanted it to, like, that deepens trust and relationships too.
Right. Yeah, I do a lot of self-reflection, and I think I probably got that from yoga. But, I'll look back and look, all right, what happened to me in that moment? What was the trigger? How did I feel? How did I react? And then if I enjoyed that entire thing, then okay, I did what I should have done, and great. And if I'm like, nope, I should have done something else, I should have done this, I should have reacted that way, I like to take that time to think about it. So, because we're going to be in that situation again, right? And how you handle that situation moving forward ultimately, I think, defines you as a person and how you either grow or you don't grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that's what's really important as a takeaway too, is there's no perfection here, right?
No, we all have flaws.
Right. We're never going to get to a point where we handle all of this perfectly. And the best that we can do is that reflection that you're talking about, is to say, not from a place of really harsh self-flagellation, really, but more so from a place of, like, what can I learn from this so that I can do better next time? If we get too caught up in the abuse, get too caught up in the inner critic and the sort of self-blaming, we can't process it in a way that we actually learn from and then can take that with us. And so I think it's really important to recognize how we're doing that reflection, right? So so this has been such an amazing conversation, and I know you started a TikTok, I don't know what it is, channel. I don't even know.
A handle, if you will. Yeah. So,
so where can people find you if they want to follow you and learn more?
Yeah. So you can follow me or find me on LinkedIn, Keith Rovinelli. And then on Instagram or now TikTok, it's fireproof_leaders. And that's where, it's a beginning of my journey. So if you look me up, you'll see some leadership content, some personal content on my Instagram. But it's really that's my vibe. That's who I am. It's just whatever I'm feeling in the moment, I'll post or I'll talk about. And like you mentioned, we're all humans. I have my flaws, and I'm just trying to get better every day and trying to help people get better every day. So, come follow me on my journey and, provide me feedback, because I have no idea what I'm doing with this social media content. And even with like the leadership philosophies and whatever I post, it's, I consume a lot of content. So, I'm constantly reading and podcasting and trying to learn from other people, but it's just my thoughts and what I think. I'm just one person. And, if you agree with me, great. And if you disagree with me, great too, because that's how I'm going to get better and continue to hone on my craft and help people.
I love it. Thank you so much, Keith. This has been such a great conversation as always.
Thank you, Kim. I'm honored to be on your show.
Thanks so much for listening to the Impostor Syndrome Files. If you would like to continue this conversation in a safe and trusted space, I would love for you to join my virtual discussion group every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. For the past several years, the group has been limited to women, but it is now open, regardless of gender, to anyone who is interested in exploring and troubleshooting common workplace challenges, building better awareness of ourselves and others, and becoming more inclusive allies at work. Check out the show notes for more info on how to find us, and please join us next week for another episode of the Impostor Syndrome Files.